guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It is 9 o'clock, which means it's time for a Talk Magic, and I am here with somebody I've talked about a lot on this channel, and I'm super excited to have him here. It is the one and only, the legend that is John Archer. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Look, I got my little light up balloon dog. It's my little mascot for the interview. If anything goes wrong, any warnings, this is the sensitive topic warning that'll come up. Hopefully I won't have to use it. How are you in the Magic Circle? How are you? Woo! Woo! Warning! Craig in the Magic Circle. There we are.
Yeah, let's keep away from that topic. I think it's probably a good idea. But no, seriously, John, I'm so glad to have you on here. You are, and I don't use this term lightly. You are a legend in Magic all over the world. You've done so much, and I want to talk about your career and what you've achieved, and maybe get some advice from you for people that are watching this, if that's okay.
That's fine. I don't like. I must admit, I'm uncomfortable with the word legend, because when I think of legends, I think of, Penn and Teller, Matt King, Williamson. Those are real legends. If I live long enough, I might just purely by living long enough, I might step into that category. But
well, you've done so much. I mean, you've got, and we're going to talk about this down the road. But I mean, at some point, you have to consider that the career that you have is something that most 95% of magicians would dream of, just the TV work alone. But then the fact that you've traveled all over the world, you've lectured all over the world, you're renowned as a creator, as a performer, all the tours that you've done with various people. I mean, you've done a lot. Yeah,
do you know, it's funny, isn't it? When you mention all that, I think about it, I go, well, actually, he's right. I have done a lot, but when it's your job, you're just doing it, aren't you? You just, you're answering an email, you're going, right, I'm flying out there, I'm doing that. And then you look back and you realize how much you've done. That's the reason I always used to like New Year. This one's been different, but I always used to love New Year, because I'd look at my diary and, I don't get booked way in advance. I get booked 4 or 5 months in advance, usually. Not a lot more than that, apart from tours and things, they might be, over ahead. So I'd look in my diary in January and think, and I'd look and see all these gaps and think, I wonder what's going to happen this year. And then I'd look back at the year that's just gone, and I think I can remember in January of that year wondering what was going to happen, and not knowing that, for example, BGT, the year, the January, I had a rough idea. I think I was going to audition for it, but I didn't know. I didn't audition until the February. And what would come off the back of that, tour in America and all of that. The beginning of the year, none of that. So all these exciting things sort of happen, but it's just the nature of the job. I tend to try and say yes to most things if they sound fun and exciting. I'm not really, never really been, and it's probably the reason I'm not rich. I've never really been money based. I've never really done anything based on, is it going to make me money, or is it going to necessarily make me famous? I've always done things because, it sounds like that'll be fun to do, or that'll be a challenge, or, obviously I'm wanting to make money. I'm wanting to earn a living. So I'm, but quite often I'll do gigs, for nothing if it's, if it's something I think is worth doing.
I've seen that. I've got friends, completely changing the subject. I've got friends that are Christians, and they've actually said to me, we've just seen an amazing magician at this Christian camp. And they don't do magic. They've got their friends of mine. They've got nothing to do with magic. I'm like, really? Okay, who is it? Thinking, it's some guy. He's like, oh, John Archer. I'm like, really? Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I do a lot of church charity stuff, loads of church and charity stuff. And like I say, it's just because, it's fun. I'll like I say, I'd rather be working than not working. So I mean, the gigs I really love is comedy club gigs, but I don't do many of them because, they tend to be, a lot of travel for not much money, and I literally can't justify doing them when it's probably not going to cover my costs. But if I'm ever in the right place and one's happening, I love the idea of a comedy club. There's such great audiences, compared with, a magic audience or a, corporate or, all the other things. You go to a comedy club and they're there to laugh, and they're not hard audiences, really. They're, the lovely audiences, really. They're certainly, they're not the way they were, 15 years ago when there was a lot of heckling and, challenging on the acts. Now it's sort of, you see some acts who are reasonable, not great, and yet still going down well with the audience because the audience are in such a good mood for it.
But that sums up you, to be honest. You ask most magicians, would you go on a comedy club? And they'd be like, oh my God, no. It's the thought of doing that would scare the hell out of them. But your style is so committed. You can be funny without magic. You could go onto a stage with nothing but a ukulele, and I've seen you do it, and you can bring the house down. And there's very few magicians that can do that. They hide behind the props. They might be happy to be a comedy magician, but there's a big difference between a comedy magician and somebody going on a comedy club and smashing it. Do you know what I mean? And
no, I do, and I think there is a differentiation between a magician who does some comedy and a comedian who does magic. So when I think of people like Matt King, he's a comedian. He's got comedy bones. He knows what he's doing. Pete Furman, he knows how to deliver lines, and he's solidly got comedy in there. There's a lot of names are going out of my head, but just loads of characters out there who have got comedy in there, and the magic is supplementary. And those people will do fine in comedy clubs. But if the main thing that you do is magic with the odd comedy line, you suddenly realize when you go into a comedy club, hang on a minute, I'm not going to get another laugh now for another minute and a half. And that's a long, long time in a comedy club, not getting a laugh.
Yeah.
You want a few laughs a minute at least to justify being up there.
Well, let me ask you, for those people that don't know you.
Danny Buckler, that was the other one I was going to mention.
Oh, Danny Buckler, absolutely.
Yeah.
For those people that don't know you, let's quickly backtrack to the beginning. How did you get into magic stroke comedy? Was it something that you got into as a young age? Did you think, I want to be a comedian, or I want to be a magician, or when did all that happen? When did you get the bug?
It's a mixture of things going on. And like when I was a kid at school, I was the class joker for sure. I was the one who was making jokes with the teacher, and always looking for the laugh if I could get it in the class. And so I always like that, but I was also a musician. So I played music in a few bands, but magic was not in there at all, really. I knew how to do a coin move. I had one magic book that somebody had bought me, which was Henry Hayes' Abbot the Magician's Handbook, right, which I lent to somebody, never got back. I've just managed to track down another one on eBay and buy it back because I wanted my first ever book. And so I had that, and I knew how to do a coin vanish, basically a French drop. I could do, and I could do it reasonably well. I mean, I've since learned I wasn't doing it that well, but it fooled people. So then I went to art college in London. I went to Central School of Art and Design, which is in Holborn, and literally 100 yards it was Alan Allen's magic spot. So I just had to cross the road and walk up Southampton Row a little bit, and I was at Alan Allen's. And I used to originally go in there because I was doing a design degree, product design. So at the end of each design, we would have to do a presentation and talk about our design, show the model if we'd made a model, the drawings, talk about why it was good, what was good about it. And of course, me being the joker, I wanted to make these presentations interesting. So, for example, I designed a lamp once, and I'd talk about, Bauhaus movement, design follows function, and minimalism, and I'd sort of say the perfect lamp would just be a light bulb. And then, I had one of these light bulbs that I'd bought from Alan Allen's that would just light on its own. I was saying, but obviously nobody's just going to want a light bulb. You've got to have something. And then I'd do my little presentation. I'd get a few laughs, and it sort of killed a bit of dull time in the class. So I used to go to Alan Allen's mainly for like little practical jokes and ideas. But Alan Allen, being who he is, would always, do a little gag or a little trick. If it wasn't to you, it'd be somebody else in the shop, and you'd be sort of leaning over the counter watching. And slowly, over the course of 3 years, going in there literally 2 or 3 times a week, he got to know me, and he showed me a few tricks. And I think he asked me to do a coin vanish. I think I showed him. I said, he said, do you know any magic? Do you magic? I said, I can do this. He went, that's not bad. That's not bad. And then he gave me some tips on it. So then I became one of the guys that, you're in the shop and you hear about them. I can remember seeing Michael Vincent in there before I knew who he was. But I can remember, seeing Michael Vincent in and out and wondering who's this guy who's in and out as much as me. And never spoke to him, said anything. But I became one of those guys that Alan would lock the door for, and he was renowned for that. Sometimes there'd be a load of tourists in there looking at stuff. He'd say, go outside and look in the window. If it's not in the window, I haven't got it. And then he'd shut the door and lock it. And then he'd sit and talk about magic for half an hour, with these people locked outside and show you books. And so I started buying bits and bobs of him, the stuff everybody gets first, dynamic coins and, I think a shell set and, just a shell 2p. And I think the first 2 books I bought of him were the Lewis Ganson's Art of Close-Up Magic books, which have got some great stuff in them. And that's where magic started. So I'm down there when I'm 19 to 21. I came back from there and I was in a little musical duo with my mate when I got back. And I remember saying to him, I wouldn't mind just doing I was cracking jokes between songs. I said, I wouldn't mind just doing a little magic trick, between one of the songs. And he was easygoing. He said, yeah, why not? So I think I did Brainwave probably with a crowd, thinking of a card, and it reversed. And sort of got a bit of a buzz out of that, of actually getting a different reaction to the laugh. But it's a similar reaction. Comedy and magic are very, very similar in the way they work, because they have a setup and a punchline. Magic has a setup and a punchline, and I think that's why I like them both. They sort of both had this thing of lulling the audience into a sense of something and then surprising them with something else. So a magic trick is very much like a joke in a way, and the reaction you get is sometimes you get laughter when sometimes people, because they're reacting in the same way that they do to comedy. That surprise, that shock, that I wasn't expecting that, which with the joke is that's funny, I wasn't expecting that. With the magic trick, it's wow, I wasn't expecting that, but we still elicit sometimes the same response of laughter with it. So I did this trick and just got addicted to it. So I started adding more tricks, such to the point that the guy I was in the double act with, was sat at the keyboard for, half of the act. And eventually we split up. It was sort of, it was inevitable really that he was going to get bored with me getting all the attention and doing these tricks. But it was what I was getting a buzz with. So that's how the comedy and the magic started. But it was always, it was always comedy and magic. It was like me doing silly things and jokes with the audience. And then let's do a trick in amongst it all. It was never let's do a trick and try and make it funny. It was always me being funny and trying to get a trick done.
So is it possible to learn how to be funny? If somebody's not, you've talked about people having funny bones.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to be a comedy magician of the sort that could headline a comedy club, but they don't know how to be funny, is that teachable, or is it something that you're either born with or you're not?
I think it's a bit of both. I think you can learn a lot of skills of the way you handle an audience, the way, your timing, your rhythm, finding your own voice, all of these things you can do classes and they'll help you get better at being comedy. But I think the true greats do have both. They've got funny bones to start with. They're just the know. It's almost like having a sense of rhythm or a sense of musicality. Like a good singer just can sing any song and knows how it goes. And funny bones is just knowing what's funny and naturally having that timing and rhythm. And there are some people that have that, and then they go, and they go and start performing in comedy clubs or wherever they perform, and you will naturally learn these other skills. You will just through doing it over and over again. It's like muscle. It's like muscle memory. You remember that worked last time. Let's try it again this time. Sometimes you're not even aware that you're doing it, but you're just trying something a little bit different. And it's sort of, it's Pavlov's dog. Every time you hear a certain thing, you just sort of instinctively know what you should do at that point. So it's certainly both. I think if you got somebody who had no sense of humor at all, you would struggle to make them into a comedian. I think somebody's got to have a reasonable sense of comedy to start with, but you don't have to be brilliant natural comedian. I mean, I watch some people and I think that those are not natural comedians, but they are very, very structured, well thought out, analyzed it all, and they've become funny through technique rather than relaxation. Whereas you get others who, just really know what's funny. They just know what works.
Yeah.
And it's a combination of both, really.
Okay. That's really useful. So you finished art college and you talked about having this double act, this duo. Did you go straight from college into sort of full-time entertainment?
No. I didn't go full-time till I was 36.
Oh wow.
So I was doing it semi-pro alongside other jobs till then. So I got back from art college and I did a few different things. I was a car salesman for a day. Hated that, obviously. I was a youth worker for a year for a Catholic youth street organization who sort of looked after waifs and strays on the street. And that was enlightening. And various little jobs. And then I joined the police force. So I joined the police force when I was 25, I think. And I did 10 years in the police, left just sort of 35, 36, just coming up 36. And that's when I started doing this. So all of that time, that 10 years in the police was really where I was, weekends and nights and time off. I was off doing gigs, mainly just for charities and, freebies and, petrol money or, the odd donation, give me what you can. I was never making a lot of money. Sometimes I was charging, but I was not. It was for the love of it rather than anything else. Which, like I say, it still is now. But then I didn't need the money. I had an income, so then I was really just doing it. And so those 10 years is where I really cut my teeth on learning stuff. And some of the hardest audiences are the ones that haven't paid. So really, I had 10 years of performing for people who we're getting it cheap.
Well, here's a question for you. My dad was a copper,
right?
For years, so I know that you can get a good pension if you stick it out, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that come on this channel and they're asking when is the right time to turn professional. Let's just assume that the apocalypse is going to end at some point and we're not going to get infestated with a bunch of zombies.
Yeah,
and it's going to go back to a certain degree of normality. Have you got any advice for turning pro? Because especially being in the police, that's a big decision to make. Turning away the potential of having a really good pension that kind of puts you in a great position.
Yeah.
Taking away that income and immediately going, boom, now I have to rely on gigs.
Yeah. I was quite fortunate because, well, I say fortunate. I got medically retired. I got a hearing condition called Meniere's disease. So my left ear is deafness and I've got noise in my left ear. So, Rob James always says, stay on the right side of John Archer because, if you're on the left-hand side, he won't hear you. And I must admit, I have had numerous occasions where people have spoken to me and I've ignored them and they've thought I'm just a rude, arrogant so-and-so. And it's just because they were stood on my left-hand side and I haven't heard them. So I got this hearing condition, and as a result, I was medically retired from the force, which meant I got a medical pension, which was the rules are with the police. If you've been in 10 years, you get it enhanced. Once you've been in 10 years, if you're medically retired, your pension is enhanced by 7 years. So I got a 17-year police pension, which isn't massive, but it covered my mortgage at the time. So I was quite fortunate that happened, and I had a choice to make. Do I tell the police about this ear thing, knowing that they'll probably retire me, or not? And I was busy enough then that I thought I could probably make a living. And I think that would be my advice to anybody if you've got a job and you are performing and out doing gigs, if you're managing to do both and it's not affecting your life, then that's the dream scenario. When it gets to the point where you think, I can't do magic as much as I'm being asked to or I want to, then that's maybe the time to think, should I now pack my job in so that this magic job can get bigger? But if you're coping with it, why would you want to stop one of your income streams? Why would you want to stop your job? If you're getting bookings, if you're a wedding magician and you're doing, weddings on Saturdays mainly, maybe the odd Sunday, maybe the odd Friday, I don't know. But if that's, what you're doing and you're doing close up with them and you're holding down a job during the week and it's not affecting your social life, it's not affecting your mental health, you're coping with it and you're earning two incomes, then don't pack in your job thinking suddenly you're going to be doing weddings on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because it probably isn't going to happen. So, like for me, I was at that point where I was turning gigs down because of I was saying I can't do that, I'm at work. And once I realized that, I thought, well, I will be able to do all of these things. And as soon as I left the place, I went and did a showcase for an agent, and he got me, the very year I finished, he got me gigs at Haven holiday camps, which were terribly paid. I think they were about 100 quid a night, but he got me 175 of them, over the course of about 7 months, 8 months, wherever. It was non-stop. And I cut my teeth, in front of tough audiences. And, I had some places where I'd die every fortnight. I'd go back there. It was like a fortnightly run of gigs I had. It was like, 2 weeks worth of different holiday camps, all, from Devon right up to sort of, Northumbria. And I would be, traveling non-stop, and you'd be going back to a place you knew you were going to die at because you died there the last time and the time before and the time before. And you think, I just can't work this room, but then you realize, well, it's the room. I've tried everything. And then you would go, well, why? I'm doing exactly the same act in this other club where the audience are right in front of me and there's no big gap and the bar's at the back, not at the side, and the tables aren't bolted down. And you'd look at all the different criteria and you go, now I know why, And so I really learned a lot about, the environment and, how you could try and change the environment to improve things, and how sometimes, you just weren't going to be able to improve things. And that taught me a lot. And I died a lot, which, thankfully I didn't die too much. I think if you die more than you have a good show, you might as well give up. If 70% of the time you're dying and 30% you're having good shows, that's an indication that maybe things aren't going right. But I did die a lot. Maybe about 30% of the gigs I was doing were hard, bad gigs. I finished at the end and I could tell the audience weren't impressed. And, they're probably still telling stories about, this terrible magician we saw once at a holiday camp, and it was me. But I remember right at the start of that Haven holiday camp season, I can't even remember what the question was now, but anyway, right at the start of that Haven holiday camp season, I was chatting to a comic who sort of worked as a MC in one of the things, and he said, "Have you died much, son?" He talked down to me like that. "Have you died much, son?" And I went, well, not really, because the truth is I hadn't had any really bad deaths. I'd had a few hard gigs, but they were all gigs where I was doing them for charities and friends and people who wanted to see me, And he said, "Oh, you will this year on all of these." He said, "You'll die." He said, "But don't worry, it'll do you good." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "you won't see a good boxer who hasn't been punched in the face." He said, the good boxers know what it feels like to be punched in the face, and they're not frightened of it. And it's a great analogy, because you can't fake confidence. You can't go out and go, "Hey, I'm confident," when you, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, "Oh, hang on a minute, what's he doing? Why have they turned around? Why is that table talking?" Whereas you go, if it's happened before, it's just like a punch in the face. You go, "I don't care," the bruise will go away, and I'm still going to win this fight. So that was a great bit of advice that I didn't really appreciate until a few years later when I sort of thought back on it and thought, I know what he means now. It makes sense now. It didn't make sense at the time. You know, the idea that bad gigs actually help, but they do. They you know, they give you a great confidence to just realize that it's not the end of the world. You know, you can get through with bad gigs.
You know what? I totally agree with you. I did the holiday park circuit for 3 years, and it's I've never worked so hard and traveled and been on the road and died. I totally agree with you 100%, John. I want to pick up something else on there. Something that's quite unique to you. Well, not unique, other people do it, but it's very rare, which is primarily you perform on stage. Now, I know that you do close-up and you're a very good close-up magician, but you don't really advertise that. People don't book John Archer as close-up magician. You're not going to see John Archer going and doing 2 hours walk around magic at a wedding reception. But how most magicians, they want to be on stage, but they don't know how to make that leap. And I've even heard magicians say, oh, there's no way you can perform on stage anymore. There's no stages to perform on anymore. But here's a guy that's busy every single year, year in, year out, working exclusively on stage, and that's been right from the beginning of your career. So have you got?
Well, it hasn't been right from the beginning. I mean, up until maybe about I can't be exactly sure, but maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I was doing close-up gigs as well. When I first started, I wasn't doing mainly, but I was certainly doing 30% of my stuff would probably have been close-up in the early days. So I never really did weddings. I never enjoyed weddings, but I did a lot of sort of corporate close-up, you know, private party type close-up things, table hopping. And I only stopped the close-up. I never really enjoyed the close-up as much as stage, in truth. You know, it always felt a little bit like I was... I know it's been said before, and I don't mean this as an insult to close-up workers at all, but sometimes you can feel a little bit like you're just another one of the hired help. You're another, you know, you're another stage on from a waiter or a waitress or the maitre d'. You know, you're popping in, going, would you like some more wine with that? Would you like to pick a card with that? You know, that steak? Would you like to have your mind read while you eat your wine, sir, or drink your wine? You know, it's so I never really loved it. It always felt a bit like that. But I mean, like I say, you still are an entertainer, and you still got a skill, and they still got value. So I don't want to drag people down and do close up. But for me, I never really got a lot of. I got bits of satisfaction when I did a good trick and the audience reacted. I got that little bit of, you know, the audience feedback that you get as a performer. But I didn't really get it in the same way I did on stage. And then about 10 years ago, a bit like packing my job in with the police, I got to that point where I thought, you know, I don't need to do the close-up gigs anymore. I'm making a reasonable living just doing stage. And there were the odd times when I'd have a close-up booking and somebody'd ring me up and say, oh, we've got a, you know, a corporate or a cabaret or a stage gig. And I couldn't do it because I was booked into a close-up, and I thought, I've got to stop doing the close-up now. And also, I do think the idea of being an all-round entertainer, although it's not a bad idea, you know, financially, I don't think it's a great idea for a performer, because you have to compromise. You have to change your performance style constantly, so you never really develop a solid style in one genre. So I can quite often watch a guy on stage, and I can watch them and go, this guy does kid shows, and I can tell, because I don't mean you here. I haven't seen you do a stage show for years, but I can tell. You watch them and you go, the way they speak to the audience has got, now and again they slip into little bits of just the way a magician would talk to a kid's audience, the way they ask for a response. They don't do it in an adult way, they do it and it's not out, hey, I'm a kid's entertainer, but you can just see, I can quite often watch somebody and think, this guy does a lot of cruise ships. And I've seen acts who have started doing cruise ships, and I see them perform again 6 or 7 years later, and I can see their acts changed, you know, because it becomes when it becomes what it needs to be for a cruise ship act, which is not bad. It's not wrong. It's just, the way you perform on a cruise ship, because of the nature of the audience, who they are, and, the fact that they haven't paid to see you, and sometimes the age of the audience. There's lots of things about a cruise ship audience that are different to a comedy club audience. So I think when you are doing several genres of performing styles, you never really perfect one. So when I packed in the close-up, I think I just learned, how to make sure that everything I did was big. You can you watch a close-up guy working on stage, and he's got no concept. I say he or she. I shouldn't just say he, but they've got no concept of the size of the venue. There's that great quote of, watching somebody on stage, and you can tell how big their living room is from watching them, because they only move around as big as they can rehearse in their living room. And that used to be a comment made a lot of times about magicians competing in stage competitions that never performed on stage. Having said that, I hardly move around on stage. I stand in front of a mic and hardly move around. That's my style. Not always. I mean, it depends on the show, but yeah. So concentrating on one genre, one type of thing, I think makes you become better in that environment.
I'd agree with that. And I think there's one thing I've always said on this channel is there's a world of difference between going out and performing on stage cold and doing close-up first. I speak to some close-up magicians, and they've upsold a cabaret show, and it's like, I've done close-up magic, and then I'm going to do a half-an-hour cabaret show. Oh, and I've smashed it. Well, that is fairly easy to do, because you've already sold them on you. Now, but walking out on stage in front of everybody, and they don't know who you are, and just walking out and getting them on side immediately, that is a real skill.
It's a bit like working a comedy club, but before you go on stage, you sit down at every table and buy them all a drink and chat to them, and then say, "I'm going on stage in a minute." That would make it a lot easier. And it's almost like that when you do close up. You've won the audience over in the easiest possible way. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think upselling a cabaret show at the end is great, and I used to do it. I used to do it a lot. I sometimes get asked now. Excuse me. I've had a dry cough all day. That's not true. It was a bad COVID joke. No, I sometimes. I mean, the only time I'll do close up now is that sometimes if I get asked to do a corporate, like a businessy type dinner, they will sometimes say, "Will you come and do a little bit of close up for the managing director and his friends after the show?" And sometimes I'll do that just to keep sweet. And that is, it's just easy. I don't have to do anything particularly, because unless I've died, in which case, they've changed their mind about having me do close up. But so yeah, you winning an audience over in any way in one genre, and then stepping up for a second performance is always going to be easy.
So have you got any advice on nerves? And we're going to talk about this in a bit, but you've put yourself in some very nerve-wracking situations. You've emceed like some of the biggest magic conventions in the world, and everyone knows it's difficult performing in front of magicians at the best of times. But then you've done a whole bunch of stuff on TV and big high-profile gigs, and you never appear nervous. Nervous. And I remember, and we'll come to Penn and Teller later on, but I'll never forget that first line. When you came out on Penn and Teller, and you're like, "I'm a bricklayer and I'm laying some bricks right now," and I was like, if he is, I can't tell, because that guy just looks absolutely on it.
It's funny because there are. It depends how you describe nerves, isn't it? Nerves is just adrenaline running through your body, and you can either be afraid of that or not afraid of that, and sometimes you get afraid of it, and you get the slight shakes, and you're, oh my word. And I've had that happen to me on a few occasions. So I was nervous like that on Penn and Teller. I genuinely was, but thankfully I performed enough that I'd been punched in the face enough that I wasn't too frightened of going out and doing it. And my audition for BGT, I was nervous. But funnily enough, the semi-final live at the Apollo didn't feel scared at all. I wouldn't say I wasn't nervous. I always have adrenaline. I'm always aware that my heart pumps a little bit faster just before I go on stage. I'm always aware that I'm in that state of about to go out and have a fight. It's that, fight or flight thing. No, I'm never going to run away with performers. We don't run away, so we are going in for the fight. So one way I deal with that, I remember at Blackpool many, many years ago, I think probably before I was even a pro, watching Vito Lupo do a lecture. And he talked about nerves, and he talked about sometimes you come off stage and you think, I could go on there and do that again. I feel like I want to go on and do some more. He said, you sort of need to feel like that before you actually go on stage. And the problem is you've got all this adrenaline rushing around your body that's, he said, so he tries to, use that adrenaline and also build that adrenaline up if you're too relaxed. So he talked about doing press-ups and shadow boxing backstage before you go on. And that's something I don't do all the time, but in big gigs. So Blackpool, when I'm comparing Blackpool Convention, which is a nerve-wracking thing because, there can be a challenging audience just because of, the fact that they're all magicians and they've had some bad MCs in the past. And it's, it's a multinational audience. So you've got to be sensitive. But I will quite often, if you were backstage at Blackpool, you'll quite often see me sort of bouncing up and down on my feet and shadow boxing. And I don't do press ups as such, because if I got down on the floor, I'd never get up again these days. But I do try and get that adrenaline racing through my body. And that's good. If you're feeling nervous and, frightened of going on, just do a little bit of physical activity. Vito Lupo said it's good to go on stage very slightly out of breath, because that works in two ways. Being out of breath, getting yourself worked up, gets that adrenaline pumped around your body so that you're less, it's affecting you less, you're less scared. But the other thing it does is it slows you down a bit. If you walk on stage, you're slightly out of breath, you're not going to go really, really fast. Certainly me, I'm sort of just taking a breath. So I get there and it's like, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And one of the biggest things that will happen when you're nervous is you will speed up. And you can see it all the time when people are dying, that they'll speed up. The one thing they won't do is pause. They're frightened of silence. They're frightened of somebody being able to heckle. You fill all of those gaps. You're just trying to get the next funny bit or the next interesting bit. You want to get off stage. You naturally speed up. And going on stage just a little bit out of breath. And again, I don't do this all the time. Sometimes I'm not, I'm really relaxed. And I think I'm not going to speed up. I know I'm going to go out and just be relaxed. But if I ever feel that adrenaline pumping, is this going to make me scared? I'll get my, I'll do a little bit of bouncing up and down, go out there. It'll slow me down and it just, calms that adrenaline a bit.
That is really great advice, John. Honestly, for anybody who wants to go on stage. I want to talk about, so we've got to the point in your career where you're very successful. You've decided to give up close up. You're doing what you love. Where did the TV stuff come in? Because you have been on TV a lot. Now, were you on Astonishing Celebrities or Astounding Celebrities?
No, not me. No.
What was the first thing that you went on? Because you've done so much.
Well, it's funny because I've done quite a few things with Tim Vine, obviously, where I've been writing for him and I've got little bit parts, which have not been magical at all. I think probably the first thing I did was with Anthony Owen, God bless him. And I did Undercover Magic for Sky.
I was thinking, not Astonishing. Yes, Undercover.
Yeah, it was Magic. Undercover Magic, and it was me, Loki, Mark Paul, Max Somerset, and Kerry Scorer.
Yes.
There's 5 of us. It was, it was one of the early days of team magic shows. I think it was sort of a British version of the Thing, totally hidden extreme magic, or Them it was called, wasn't it? Totally hidden extreme magic that happened in America, and Sky did a very low budget, cheap version of it with us 5, and it wasn't a massive success, but I think that was the first thing I did, and then from that, things like Help My Supply Teacher's Magic, which was really great. We did 3 series of that.
That was so good. That was so good.
Yeah, and various other sort of bits and bobs, you know, where I'd get asked to appear and step in. But then, you know, also things with Tim, you know, and writing, bits of writing and stuff. But yeah, sort of it all happened a little bit by accident, and Anthony Orr was good to me. He was a fan. So, you know, I think he would have used me more if he could have sold me to the channels. It's always difficult, you know, selling a middle-aged old white guy. So, but I know he used to pitch me for lots of things, and you know, he'd sort of get in touch and say they went for so instead, which is fair enough. That's the nature of telly. But yeah, it was. I think Undercover Magic was probably one of the first things I did.
And have you got any advice for getting on TV? Not about the BGT thing, we'll get to that. But you, before BGT even existed, you, like you say, Supply Teacher is Magic, 3 seasons. You were the star of that show. Have you got any advice for getting onto TV shows like that? And because that's the holy grail for magicians, isn't it? I want to have my own TV show.
It is. But do you know what? I don't think magic is the best genre to see. Television. I don't think television is the best genre to see magic in. You know, I don't think magic works brilliantly on television. Magic works best live. That you know, it's 100% certain. People know that everything they're watching live is real, and you could still, you know, cheat at a tremendous amount. But TV, you know, it's a flat wall. There's a gap between you and the audience. So I think it's difficult to ever, you know, sell a magic show to a TV company that's going to, you know, they've got to be excited about the person first, you know. So people like Dynamo and Darren, you know, they're very, very different, and you know, to what's been before, and they're an exciting prospect. So I think. I don't think there's any shortcut. You've just got to try and be good. You've just got to try and be good in what you do. Maybe be different. Maybe do stuff that's TV friendly. I mean, everybody now is, you know, YouTube things, and everybody, you know, pranks seem to the way that every magician is getting hits on YouTube at the moment. Is sort of, you know, magical prank type stuff. Now that might then get the attention of TV people, but I really think it's a hard sell. Magic is a hard sell on television at the moment. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not. Television's fun to do. I'm not desperate to be on television. I would do it if it came, but you know, I wouldn't go chasing it necessarily. If somebody knocks on my door and said, "Do you want to do this?" I'll probably go, "Yeah, that sounds fun." Like I am with all the gigs, you know, that sounds fun. And television is fun to do. But I don't think there's any easy way to get in. I mean, you can do BGT, you can do Penn and Teller Foolers, and they'll give you a great clip. But the chances that you will get your own TV show, I don't know if any magician's got their own show off BGT that I'm aware of. They've got little spots, and you know, but I doubt whether they got them purely off the back of BGT. They were probably doing stuff already, or in, you know, I know Ben Hart's done some TV stuff since BGT, but I think he would probably have been up for that even if he hadn't done BGT, to be honest. So you know, if you want to get noticed and seen in a good clip, then those shows are good to do, but there's no guarantee it's going to lead to anything. They'll help with work if you do well, for sure, but I don't think there's any real guaranteed work to get on television these days. No guaranteed way of doing it.
Here's a question: why did you decide to do BGT? Because you've been on TV an absolute ton, and it's kind of like it's a competition, and
yeah,
if you'd have, it's that kind of whole risk thing, isn't it? It's kind of like risk versus reward. You smashed it. I mean, you absolutely smashed it. And I said to you just off camera, you've probably sold more bottles of you've sold more bottles of that drink trick for Joseph Miranda than anyone else, because every magician saw that and went, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. But there is a risk there that if you messed up or something, they have in the past portrayed magicians in a very bad light, but you kind of decided to go and audition and take that risk, even though you've already got a very high profile career at that point and you've done so much. Was there a reason why you did that? Because a lot of people, they're debating about whether to do the BGT thing or not. So
I was in exactly the same position. Obviously, I'd been asked, as are most working magicians these days, I'd been asked by BGT if I wanted to go on for several years beforehand, and I'd always sort of ummed and ahed and said no for that reason, that it might do me some harm. But the reason I did it last year, or the year before now, was a combination of things. It was a combination of noticing that the program had changed. I'd noticed that they were being less harsh with acts. If you watch it now, you won't hear the audience booing at all, ever. The only people the audience boo now are the judges, and that's deliberate on behalf of the TV company, because people have taken it badly when they've been on TV and had a bad experience. And there was that guy on was it The Right Stuff, or Jeremy Kyle, committed suicide after being on the show. So I think the TV company realised, hang on a minute, we've got a duty of care to these people who we bring on. So there's no guarantee that you're not going to get, I'm sorry, that wasn't very good, you've been buzzed off. There's no guarantee that won't happen. But there is a sort of a guarantee that they're not going to make you look like an absolute loser. They might make you look like you're not particularly very good on the night. That's always a risk. And there's a few acts that have been on there, and I've thought that was slightly unfair because I know that guy's a good act. But for whatever reason, they haven't connected on the night of the audition or the day of the audition. So that was one reason. The other reason was obviously Russ Stevens chatted to me and sort of, slightly persuaded me that it might be, fun to do and a good idea to do. And I talked with the producers, and they sort of eased my mind and said, look, they said something very interesting to me, which they said, we sort of have two types of act on the show. We have the acts that are like, everybody thinks that's terrible, but they're almost deliberately terrible. The tap dancing reindeer and things like that. And they go on there knowing that they're a bit of a joke, and everybody laughs at them, and they get through or they don't get through. He said the other types we have are the types who are great and the audience love, and we don't really have much in between. And that's sort of true now. And he sort of said, you're not going to be in the first category. You're going to be in the second category, where you know what you're doing, the audience is going to love you. And he said, we can't guarantee what the judges will do. He said, we can't promise you anything on that, but we don't think you're going to have a bad time. So there was that going on. And then the other thing that was going on was, I'm 60 now, and it was 59 when I did that. And I thought, well, I'm not after a career. My career doesn't need to get any better. I'm happy to continue doing what I'm doing. I don't need a big TV show. I don't need a big theatre tour show. Any of those things, like I say, I wouldn't turn them down, but I'm happy. I'm enjoying life. But I wanted to challenge myself to be out of my comfort zone. I wanted to do something that scared me a little bit, because I wasn't doing anything. Everything I did was just nice gigs. I don't have bad gigs very much at all now. Most of my gigs are great fun. The audience, nice. And I just thought, I want to do something where I'm scared again. And I'm challenging myself. And there was a little bit of, I would like my family to see me do well on there. I'd like my kids to see me on national television, getting nice comments from Simon Cowell and stuff. So I thought that would be nice, for my mum and dad. And they were all nervous. My wife didn't want me to do it. My mum and dad were a bit nervous that, you know, I might get upset and hurt by them. But I sort of felt confident that that wouldn't happen. I thought I might not storm it, but I should be able to hold my own. I felt confident enough. I'd been punched in the face enough not to be scared of it. And so it was a combination of all those things that just made it happen that year. But it was a slow build. And sort of an aligning of all those different things. I certainly wouldn't have done it in the early days, but now I would say for any magic act out there, for no other reason than, you know, just challenging yourself to put something together that'll work in that time frame, and going out there and putting yourself in the mix. It's a good thing. It's a good challenge. There's no guarantees you're going to do well, but yeah, it's good.
Do you think that if you're a close-up magician, you've never performed on stage before, ever, and you've only done close-up, but you're a good close-up magician, you can still go on BGT and make an impression? Because I've spoken to people that are close-up magicians, and they've said, oh yeah, I'm just going to go and I'm going to walk down to the judges' table and I'm going to do my close-up stuff, and they're going to absolutely love it. And I kind of think, you're still walking out on a stage, and I think you need experience of being on a stage, even if your plan is to go, but I've never done BGT, so I don't know. Would you say your average close-up magician that's never done a stage show in their life would still be able to pull off a BGT by coming down to the judges' table?
I do actually. Yeah, I think BGT is great for close-up workers because they're, you know, and especially out, you know, they've got Russ on board. So Russ is very aware of how to film something and make a little thing look big. And, you know, a mouse is as big as an elephant on television. There's that old story. So, you know, if you work with them, and if they want you on the show, and you've got a good idea and you work with them, then they can make you look good. Even if on the night, to the audience, you may not have looked spectacular. Television can get rid of a million weaknesses. You know, editing and you know, a good camera work can make a weak ordinary act look amazing on TV. So yeah, I think close-up magic works really well on BGT. I think there's a lot of acts that have done well on the show, have done well. You know, with, you know, you look at what's his name with Cartoon, you know, Jamie Raven with, you know, with Cartoon, just a very simple self-working, well, not self-working, but close to self-working card effect, you know, and the reaction that got, and you know, and where that took him. So yeah, you know, and Richard Jones, I mean, effectively a close-up magician, went on there and won the thing, you know. So I mean, granted, you know, later on he did some bigger stuff, but I don't think the bigger stuff was what won him it. I think the thing that won him it was the story, obviously, and you know, that's what BGT want. BGT loved the whole royal, you know, national thing. That obviously that was playing for him, but also it was the strong little close-up bits that he did as well. So yeah, I think close-ups are a great medium for it, and I think a bit of stage experience would help, but I don't think you need it for that particular show.
Okay, that's really good advice as well. Can I talk about Penn? Excuse me. Can I talk about Penn and Teller quickly? Because you were the very first person to fool Penn and Teller, and which is amazing. And obviously, you got a chance to perform in Vegas, which is just brilliant. I want to ask you about how that whole process felt for people that maybe want to go on Penn and Teller, but also the bank night routine that you did, which was and still is the most entertaining bank night routine ever. Obviously, you then went and released it later on with Vanishing Ink. But I remember the instructions, and you said in the instructions, I'd rather you not do it like this, because this fits my character. And I'd rather you come up with your own way of doing it and write different things on the envelope. One thing that I've noticed is you've released stuff, and the stuff that you've released is fair play. You know, and we'll talk about some of your releases in a bit, if that's okay. But you seem to be the guy that people rip off. You've never released your handling of the bottle routine that you did on BGT, but I've seen so many other magicians do it. You know, and everybody bought the bank night routine. You might have put in the instructions, don't do this, but they all have, because it's such an entertaining way of doing it. Does it frustrate you that people are taking your stuff and just basically, do you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And the answer is it doesn't frustrate me at all. When I started performing, I did lots of Tommy Cooper gags and jokes that weren't mine. I didn't write them. I used it. And a lot of time when people are starting off, they haven't got the skills to come up with all of these things. So they use other people's stuff. So they're going to use mine. The smart people won't keep doing that for the whole of their career. The smart people will realize if you want to get on TV, if you want to get noticed, you will get noticed by being different. Nobody is gonna. You might think that a TV producer or a cruise director or a theatre manager or an agent is going to be impressed with your version of Banana Bandana. But the truth is, they'll have seen it done a million times by a million different people. So, they're not going to be impressed. What they're going to be impressed with is when they see you do something and think, I've never seen anybody else do that like that. So people copying my stuff, it's not harming me, it's harming them. Now, if they're happy, as I am, just to plod along with the career I've got, if they're happy to plod along with the career they've got, doing stuff of mine and other people's routines, I don't mind that. Like I say, it's not affecting the gigs that they're getting are not going to be the gigs that I'm getting. And this, I've got an awful lot out of the magic community. I like the magic community. I mean, we're a bit of an odd family full of strange relatives, but I do like the magic community. I like that idea of brotherhood, sisterhood, peoplehood, whatever the name for it is now. But I like that idea that we support each other. I like the idea that, this idea that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And there's these magicians, who've written articles in your collection of Abra behind you, or, in these great books of the time, and somebody else, and I've read them and I've thought, I'm going to do that, So my duty is to pass that on, is to pass that baton on and put stuff out there. And yeah, people are going to copy me. The reason I put don't use my words is for their benefit, not for mine. It's for their benefit. They will get much more talked about doing a routine based on, their girlfriend's telephone numbers or their bank account details or a million other things. You can have anything written on those envelopes. And I've said it before in other places. There are probably better routines than mine out there. If somebody was brave enough to just experiment with it, there's probably routines that work better than my, because the something, nothing, yours, mine, sex, that's borrowed from, yours and mine routines of the past and very, it's not totally unique to me. I've picked bits out and come up with that. And there's probably a better routine, picking bits from other things and coming up with something original. So it's the performers there that are going to benefit, not me. I'm not telling them to use their own thing because I don't want them doing my routine at all. I think that they'll learn a lot more. Creatively, they'll challenge themselves more. They'll be more satisfied doing a routine of their own, and they'll be more successful doing an original routine. But if they choose not to, so be it.
That's great advice. But how would people, right? Okay, you've alluded a few times in this interview to your writing, and you do a lot of writing. You've written for Tim Vine. You go on tour with him quite regularly. That's on public record. You also, one of the things that really, in my opinion, what you do to a trick is the routining behind it, the structure, the presentation, the scripting, whatever you want to call it. It's not. And again, we'll talk about your releases in a bit, but anything that you've ever released to the magic community, it's not like what you see these days, which is here's a prop, come up with your own presentation. It's you can tell you've worked it out and you've got this full presentation. What advice can you give magicians that are wanting to take a prop you went on Britain's Got Talent with a standard dealer item, and everyone was doing it the way the instructions said doing it, which is put it in the bag. Oh, look, it's disappeared, blah, blah, blah. Vanishing bottle type thing. And you took it, mechanical prediction, and completely turned it on its head and made it an act that you got through to the semi-finals of BGT with. So what advice can you give people about taking an item? You just said, you have to be unique. How can you take a standard dealer item and make it your own? How can you script that? Have you got any advice on that?
No. I mean, it's different for every routine for me, but for me, whenever I'm thinking of a piece, I won't call it a routine because the routine there's a routine and a trick, and that's the piece. But whenever I'm thinking of a piece, sometimes it's the trick that I'm attracted to. And I need to think what's going to be the routine. And sometimes I have an idea for a routine, a storyline, a pattern, a bit of pattern, think something I want to talk about, but I don't really know what the trick is. And the skill is bringing those two together, and it's different every time. So it's very difficult for me to say what it is. I think the first thing is I want to try and, if I'm doing a standard piece, and a lot of my routines are standard, tossed out deck, magic square. A lot of my things are pretty standard effects that I've slightly changed the methodology. I've slightly twisted it, and usually that's because I just want to streamline it for me and what works for me. And then I've come up with a way of presenting it that is slightly different for me. And sometimes it's not very different at all. My tossed out deck routine is really just the gags. The routine and the presentation are very similar to, 100 other tossed out deck routines. So I try and think of the journey I want to take with the routine. And sometimes, like I say, it's different with each one. I mean, I could talk about, how, like my Laura Buxton card coincidence routine, which that came about because I loved the trick that Pat Page does, which I think is in his book. It's called the Soldier's Card Trick, and it's just pairs on top of a double lift, and the cards keep matching. And I love that routine. I used to always love it when Pat did it. I just thought it's so clean and it's so effective. It's very powerful, but it didn't particularly have an end, and it was pretty much, here's a trick, and just go through the motions, do the trick. It didn't have any emotional hook. So for a long time, I loved that trick, but I thought, I don't know how I'll do it. I haven't got an idea of how I don't just want to get somebody up and say, let me show you a trick. I never really do that. It's never here's a trick. There's always a story or a slight reason as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then I went to Ripley's Believe It or Not, and we were filming there actually for Help My Supply Teacher's Magic. And I went up on the top floor, and they had a video loop playing of the Laura Buxton coincidence. And as soon as I thought that's a fascinating story. In my head, I just thought I could put that story, with that trick. And that's a reason why I'm going to try something. It's all about coincidence. I'm going to tell a story about a great coincidence. I'm going to tell a funny story about a great coincidence. And then I'm going to demonstrate a coincidence for them and link it back to the story and then come back. And the same with like Comedy Killer, which is like my version of Larry Becker's Colossal Killer.
That routine, John, I love that routine. I did that for years.
And that's just a story. It is purely an excuse to tell a almost Les Dawsonist. I wouldn't ever claim it's as good as anything Les Dawson ever did, but it's Dawson-esque in that. I gave her a hot cup of coffee. She held it like this in both hands because I had no cups. It's that type of, Dawson would tell that type of story. It's that thing. But that was purely, I loved Colossal Killer, but I couldn't make sense of the off by one part of it. So my thinking was, well, I want a presentation for it that justifies that whole off by one thing, and almost becomes a reason for doing the trick. And so you know, I see sometimes my routine is to solve a weakness, or what I see as a weakness in the trick. And sometimes it's because I want to share something that's interesting, or share something about I like giving truths in my performance, telling true stories. Nana's box was all based on a true thing that when I stayed at my nana and my granddad's, my nana did have a box full of junk that I used to play with. It was, toy soldiers and buttons, and, I used to open it up and just get it all out on the floor. And I can remember this little tin. And I think we tell so many lies in our performance as a magician. Our job is basically to lie to the audience. And I know Jeffrey Durham has a thing where he tries never to tell a lie to the audience. If it's a rigged deck of cards, he will never say this is a natural deck of cards. This is a normal deck. He wouldn't say that. He wouldn't mention the fact that he would just say it's a deck of cards, which is true. I'm not quite of that same persuasion. I will tell lies if it suits me for the purpose of the performance. But I think if you add truth into your performance, it gives a credibility to your whole performance. People can tell when they're hearing a true story, and when it's, if you say, do you know what, my father always wanted to be a spaceman, you're probably going to go, no, I think you're making this up. But an audience can tell when you're speaking from the heart and there's some truth.
It's true. I remember the first time I saw you do Collared. I was watching it. I was thinking that's such an amazing way to hook an audience in, because you were talking about, I'm on the road all the time. Yeah. I'm going all over the place, and it's true. But at the same time, as well as being true, it's drawing. It's almost like you're peeking the curtain back a little bit and telling them a bit about.
Yeah, but also an audience will accept a false premise if you justify it in a comedic and almost reliable way, so that whole thing is, they know that I haven't bought a dog to keep me company on my journeys. They know that, but they've sort of said, well, it's feasible, the reason why he's told us this seems feasible. Yeah, that's something that, in an alternate reality could possibly happen. We'll go along with it. In the same way that, people will accept Alice in Wonderland and all these other crazy stories. There's a little bit of believability in there somewhere along the line. And so I like to add a bit of truth. I like storytelling. But for anybody else, the key thing is originality. Just try to think, how can I do this that hasn't been, in a way that it hasn't been done before?
Yeah.
And there isn't an easy answer to that. It's hard work. It's graft, and it's trying something out. I don't come up with many new routines. If I come up with one new routine a year, that's a good year for me. And I haven't come up with anything since, probably the last new thing I came up with was the lottery prediction thing that I did a version of it on BGT, but I was doing a slightly longer, better version really on tour with Tim. And that's probably the last fresh thing I came up with, which is about 3 years ago. I've got ideas for stuff I want to work on, but until I start getting back to gigging, I can't really try anything out.
But yeah, look at again, I'll bring up the BGT semi-final performance. That must have been in the last 3 years. You bought a bottle and then you kind of came up with a routine with it. I know it's not completely original in terms of methodology, but again, you turned it on its head. I think, you're doing stuff like that all of the time.
Yeah. Well, whenever I buy a prop, I'll never buy anything now. Close-up, close-up stuff I buy. Close-up's my hobby. So, I've just bought the color changing knives, David Regal's. But I probably never perform in a live situation with those. Those are just my hobby. I still have a drawer full of close-up stuff. I'm still like a hobbyist when it comes to close-up. But stage stuff, I rarely buy any stage prop or, bit of business unless I know what I'm going to do with it beforehand. So I saw those bottles at Magic Live, and I thought, wow, that's it's a great illusion. It's a great effect, but it's just, it wasn't enough. It was a bottle changing to another bottle. A bottle vanishes and it's another bottle. And that wasn't enough for me. I thought, how am I going to present that? I've got to make that bigger. How am I going to make it bigger? And I thought about it for a day, which for me was not very long at all. Sometimes I can sit and ponder a prop. I pondered the prop for the lottery trade. I pondered that for about a year and a half before I finally came up with how I'm going to perform it. And then right now I'll buy it because I know I'm going to do it. But I won't buy something and then think I'll buy that because it's a great trick, and then I'll work out what I'm going to do with it. I always work out what I'm going to do with it first. So I thought about it just for a day and thought, it's a great kicker finish. And then I think, what other tricks have kicker finishes? What it's obviously it's a sucker trick. It's you think this has happened, but actually it's this. And the mechanical deck idea came in. Do it with bottles. You do it with drinks rather than that, and that came to me quite quickly. Came to me within like I say, a day or two, and I was there. And I bought one, and then at Blackpool I bought another. I realised I need some spares. I bought another two at Blackpool the following year, I think. So yeah, the secret is to, see something and think about what you're going to do with it in advance rather than just buying it. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of props that you don't do anything with.
That's it. And I think that sometimes magicians are looking for that they're looking for that trick that's going to make them famous. There's that trick, there's that shiny trick. They haven't found it yet, but when they buy it, that's the trick that's going to make them famous. And it's not the trick, is it?
It's never about the trick. It's about you. You want to get to a stage where people don't want to see your tricks; they want to see you. And you do want to get to that. You sort of want to try and get yourself to that stage where you could walk into a room, or walk onto a stage with somebody and be interviewed and chat to them, and the audience will be quite happy. They're not bothered that you don't do a trick. They just want to see you and listen to you and hear you. And that, that's not easy. And it's a challenge to get to that point.
Have this ability, John, of taking standard tricks that everyone else does and turning them on their head. I remember years ago now watching you perform. I can't remember where it was. I cannot remember where it was. But you were performing with a Pro Mystic dice that everyone's got. And you were doing this thing where you were putting it in a cup and you were getting them to pass it out in the audience. And you were like, okay, well, now the odds of this, and now the odds of this, and now the odds of this. And it was building and building and building and building. And then 7 or 8 people in the audience had thought of a number. And then you were like, right, okay, boom, 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 boom. And you got a standing ovation from this.
Yeah.
Standing ovation. And I'm like, this is a trick that everybody buys. And this was about 10 years ago, John. And I remember it as well today as I did 10 years ago. Yeah. I was just sitting there, and it was mainly laypeople. I can't even remember where it was. It wasn't a magic convention. I don't even think you knew I was there. And I was watching it, and I was thinking, now this is a standard trick. And everybody does the same thing. Cover it up with your hand. You're thinking of 4. Yeah. And you took the same trick, played it to 200 people, and got a standing ovation. Wow.
Yeah, I'll tell you how that routine came about. It's funny because I've sort of phased that routine out now, because I started to get, just before lockdown, I started to get a few people coming up saying, is it one of those electronic dice that you can buy? Because they've been on Facebook and they've been advertised quite a bit now, and people are aware of them. And I sort of, that made me think, if a few people are coming up and asking, there's an awful lot of people who aren't coming up and asking. So I'm sort of, even though I love the routine, it's slightly, I might do it, but it's not in my number one performance list anymore. But that came about purely because, it's a fantastic method. It's a great method. It's solid and it's clean. It's reliable. His stuff's great. But it is just, you think of a number, I'll tell you what it is. And so I thought, you know, to do it right, you've got to do it more than once. And lots of people doing it more than once. And then I thought, well, the chances of getting it right twice are much more impressive than once. So it's got to be about the odds. It's not going to be about the fact of getting the number right. It's about the fact of how many times you get the number right and how impossible that becomes. And it's very similar to, structurally, it's very similar to the Magic Square routine I do. It's that.
I saw you do that on Penguin Live, by the way.
Yeah. And it's very similar to the way with that, I up the pace. So with the dice routine, it all became about the odds. But then I thought, well, I've got to make those odds a reality to the audience, so then it became about each time I tell them the odds and I tell them the equivalent. So, you know, the first one, that's 1 in 6. That would mean that if I tried to guess the number of that dice every day of the week, once a week, I'd be right just by chance. And then the second time it's, you know, they shake it and I go, okay, think of your number. All right. If I got your number right, it would be, you know, 1 in 6 times 6, 1 in 36. That mean if I guessed every day for a month, once a month, I'd get both of the numbers right. And so it was, they'd all think of the numbers first, and I'd ask them the name, and I'd ask them a couple of bits of information about them. That was just purely for comedy. What's your name? You know, if it would be something like, what's the most amazing place you've ever been to in your life? And so this became about asking them the questions was the pseudo method. So asking the questions as each person thought of a number. What's your favorite bond? The name of the first person you ever kissed. So each of them got 2 questions. I wrote them on the pad. It was also my excuse to hold the receiver and also write the number the reading I got, so I didn't forget all the numbers. So that was my fake methodology. I never said that. I never said particularly. It was just something for the audience to wonder about. And then when I revealed the numbers, it became about the odds and the chances of me getting your number. And you said the first person you kissed was Mary, and the most amazing place you've ever been to in the world is the Seychelles. I think you thought the number 6. Sit down if I'm right. And then the next person, and then I'd do the odds, and it got to 46,656 to 1. That would mean I'd have to do this, every day of my life. For 130 years, or twice a day for 65 years, guessing 6 rolls of a die to eventually get all of you right. So if you see this, if I get your number right now, this audience have seen a once in a lifetime trick. And it just naturally built. There was this section of comedy and byplay, and obviously the answers they gave me, I would make jokes up about them, and what's the most amazing thing you've ever eaten? And they say steak and chips. You obviously, have you never been to an Indian restaurant? You can go anywhere with the answers they give you. The name of the first person you ever kissed. I'm making a bit of an assumption here that somebody's ever been brave enough to kiss you. All of these silly little things that you could say. So that became the routine, and that just developed from the idea that it's got to be about the numbers and the odds, but also. I know that I'm strongest when I'm interacting with people. I know that's, if I do 6-card repeat, it's all right. And I do 6-card repeat. I've never done it, I think, in front of magicians. But I have a routine that's got some of my own gags in it. It runs along pretty much the same storyline. I went to see a guy, he did this trick. I went backstage. Very similar to where everybody did it. I've just got my own gags that I add in. That's not where I'm strongest, though. I'm strongest when I'm chatting to people and I'm riffing off them and I'm trying to ad-lib a little bit or give the impression of ad-libbing. And I'm also strong when I have got people on stage with me and I can play them off, me against them and them against each other. And that's just being aware of, of who I am. And that's different for every performer. Graham Jolly is much more, it's all about him and the Serbic, and he's less interested in the performance, but it still works brilliantly. So every performer has a style that works well for them. Williamson is brilliant with kids, just the way he just manhandles kids. He's just developed this brilliant technique, and that's developed in the way he manhandles spectators. You know, he's got this physicality about him that works, and when he's got that madness and physicality and people, you know, he's strong. That's what works for him. It's finding that for yourself. It's working out where you are.
And that's something that you do so well. And we talked about this off camera. You're one of the first people that I ever saw that presented mentalism in a funny, entertaining way. Because you do magic, but when you first burst onto the magic scene, at any rate, with Educating Archer, you were doing mainly mentalism, and it was so funny. And I told you off camera that I was speaking to Dave Jones, who's a very knowledgeable magician, and he said mentalism is boring, but if you want to do it right, look at John Archer. And
he's a smart guy, that Dave Jones. Well, he's not at the moment. He's covered in hair, but he's normally a smart guy.
Looks like Santa Claus at the moment. Yeah. But that's the thing, you know, you do present mentalism in a very funny, hilarious way, which I've hardly ever seen done before. You know, it's very dry normally. And
yeah, that was purely accidental. That was purely, I like mentalism. I've always been drawn a little bit to mentalism, but the main reason that what I do is mentalism is because mentalism is a magical medium that uses people. Mentalism is all about spectators and their thoughts and their actions. And because I'm strongest when I'm talking to people and dealing with their thoughts and their actions, mentalism is great for me. So I started doing mentalism and comedy, and nobody had ever told me that you didn't do that, you know. And I know that Eugene Berger said that you shouldn't do comedy and mentalism together. But I sat and had dinner with him, and he said, "You're an exception. You're one of the few exceptions that can do it," and that was lovely. And to be honest, that was the last time I ever saw him before he died. It was at where was it? Mindvention in Vegas, and he took me out. I performed, and then he invited me out, bought me dinner, and there was a few of us, and he sort of said, I've said that comedy and mentalism should be done together. But you are an exception. You make it work, and it was lovely. And that's my last memory of Eugene Berger, is him having those words for me. Lovely stuff.
Wow, talk about high praise. That's amazing.
Mm.
Let's talk about your creations, because were the Alakazam DVDs the first DVDs that you brought out?
Yeah, okay. I've only brought 3 DVDs out. So there was Educating Archer, there was Further Education, and then there was my blindfold tips, which was basically all my blindfold routine, which embarrassingly now is still out there with me kissing a female spectator on stage, which I would never do now. But for some reason then it never seemed wrong. Whereas all of a sudden now it's definitely wrong. And I apologize. Please don't emulate me. But so yeah, Educating Archer was the first set I did, and that was Peter Nardi coming to me, bless his cotton socks, and sort of saying, do you want to do a DVD? And I wasn't really sure. I sort of thought, well, I just do standards, I just do stuff. I didn't really think I had anything to offer, but he sort of talked me into it, and I was surprised how big a hit they were. I wish I'd organised a better deal with him, really, but I wish I'd known how good they were going to be. But no, in fairness, he was very generous to me. He bought me some lovely extra gifts. But that was the first thing I ever did, and it was all. In fact, I've never released anything that isn't something that I perform. I've never come up with an idea that and released it as an idea that I don't do. Just because I don't think anything's good enough until I've worked it into a point where I know it's good enough. I would never release anything that I wasn't 100% certain it would work.
It's the DVDs that you brought out made a big impact on the magic community. I mean, a big impact. And then you brought out some standalone stuff as well. You brought Collared Out as a standalone piece. Streets, I think, obviously Vanishing Ink with the blank, the banknight routine, Black Knight. Is is bringing out routines and creations like a big part of, because some, you see people like Jay Sankey, who's like 99% of his state, it's all about bringing out material, new material, new material. You feel to me more like a Richard Sanders. When Richard Sanders brings something out, it's a well-worked routine, and it makes sense, and there's scripting and everything. And your stuff is the same. Do you have plans to bring more stuff out, or is it just kind of no, not at all?
No. I what would happen is if I come up with something and I thought this would sell, then I might approach somebody and say, we could bring this out. I've considered maybe trying to release the Laura Buxton thing as a package, but it's sort of, you can lecture that, and with a bit of effort you can make it up yourself. Now sometimes people don't want to make things up themselves, and if you sold it all ready-made, pre-packaged, here you go, maybe that would sell. I don't know. It's a possibility, but I certainly don't sit. Whenever I'm working on routines, it's always just about I'm working on routines for my act. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the routine with a bottle, it would be a sellable routine, but it's sort of, the product's already out there. And again, it's just a matter of putting it all together.
True, but Educating Archer and Further Education was, for me, a DVD set where you took standard stuff and you just made it exceptional, and you showcased how to actually perform and how you actually handle these props. I know in the 10 years since that's been released, just off the top of my head, you mentioned it before, there's the Magic Square routine that you did on your Penguin Live. There's
the Magic Square routine's on Educated Archer, though.
Oh, is it? I didn't even
yeah.
Fuzzy memory. But I bet there's loads of stuff that you've created for your act that could go into another DVD. John Archer Live, 40-minute show.
I'm not sure that there is really a lot of stuff is either out there on Penguin or Murphy's, or I don't think there is. I could add tweaks. I could do one of those things where the workers' tips and everything else. I'm not particularly interested in that. When something is ready, I'll release it if it makes sense. I'm not worried about. It's all good fun and a bit of extra pocket money. They're releasing stuff for me. It's not my living. I don't consider myself a creator that needs to have a couple of new releases every Blackpool or anything. That's not who I am. So
what about John Archer's magnus opus?
Yeah, I have considered that. Basically everything that I've ever released, with all the little secret little tips that I've discovered since releasing them, and also my thoughts on getting thumped in the face and nerves and microphone technique and everything else. I mean, I'd like to do that at some point. I'm not very good at sitting down and writing, though. I really need to get to the point where I can, because it would be a lot. It would be a big book, I think. If I talked about all the things I want to talk about, so editing and and how we edit ourselves and all of that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot to be talked about.
Yeah,
but
that'd be a great book.
But yeah, I'd like, just as a legacy, I'd like to have a book out there at some point, something to leave behind and say this is that 100 years time somebody could pick it up and go, I'll do that routine by this old guy who died 100 years ago called John Archer. Fair enough.
And before we wrap this interview up, I just want to circle back to Penn and Teller, because I asked a question, but then we completely went in a different direction, and we
did.
With regards to Penn and Teller, did you go on there with the aim to fool them, or was it more about wanting to have a good video? You talked about having a good video for having promoting yourself, or did you have a desire? Because it did fool them. And it fooled me. It fooled everyone. But I mean, was that the goal, or was it more about?
Do you know what? A bit like BGT, it was a combination of reasons. What you got to remember is when that happened, that very first show, nobody knew what it was going to be. So there was a buzz. I don't know whether you were involved in the buzz, but there was a buzz about the show being made by all magicians, and there was discussion on discussion boards, magic discussion boards about foolers, and is it going to be possible to fool them? And all the acts had been asked, excuse me, all the acts that had been asked to go on were chatting to each other about, well, can you fool them? How can you fool them? So for me, it was it was a challenge of, this seems like an exciting project. There was a bit of nerves about it because nobody knew whether it was going to be an expose show. I mean, Penn and Teller are, America's equivalent of Craig Petty, the bad boys of magic. And
drop that right now. That helping, John.
I'll keep referring back to Craig, the bad boy of magic, just so you can't edit it out. But they had this slight reputation that there might be a bit bad and reveal how we did it, and nobody knew. I mean, now in hindsight, it makes sense. Of course they wouldn't. They love magic and magicians too much, but we didn't know that. So there was a lot of reticence. There was also a lot of excitement. Also, I knew a lot of guys who were doing it, who'd been asked to do it. Mm-hmm. And I thought it'd be fun to work with that group. I thought it'd be fun to, appear on a ITV, Jonathan Ross, Saturday night, Friday night, whatever it was, shiny floor show. That was something new to me. So it was very difficult to say no to. They asked me about various things. Funnily enough, Johnny Thompson was obviously their magic consultant, who was the guy who decided whether you'd fooled them or not. And he'd suggested to them that I do my magic square routine. He'd sort of said, get John to do his magic square routine. It's hilarious. And I'd said, no, I want to do this envelope routine. And I went to the audition in this little sort of church hall, school hall, somewhere, I can't remember. There was a gang of us, all recognizing each other. Oh, you're doing it, oh, yeah. And I did my envelope routine as an audition piece. And the producer said, Johnny Thompson's mentioned your magic square routine. Can you do that as well? So I did that. And they said, oh, that's really funny, but it's a bit long. We could cut it. I said, I really don't want to do the magic square routine. I said, I know for a fact it won't fool them. But the envelope trick is the only thing of everything I've got that has a slight chance of fooling them. I'd actually released it just as a download about a year before. So I'd released it just, I think I'd mentioned it on the Magic Cafe, and I'd sold maybe a dozen to people because they hadn't got anything to say. I just said, I've got this new bank night routine. I knew that Banachek had got one because I'd sent Banachek a copy of it. And I thought there's a vague chance he may have spoken to Teller, because obviously he works with Penn and Teller, and he came up with their bullet catch routine. I thought there's a slim chance they might have heard of this method, but it's the only chance I've got. It's the only thing I've got that uses a new method that I haven't got out on video. It's not well known, that I might stand a chance. So I had maybe a 10% thought in my head that it might fool them, because in my head I thought what they'll be doing is ticking off all the possible methods. I knew that Teller would be looking out for a thumb tip, and he would be looking out for a table steal or a tray steal or a body steal. And I knew that they would be expecting a single note to come out, not a bunch of notes, and not unfolded. So I knew that, I knew the way they'd be thinking as they analysed it, and I knew that it might fool them because it's difficult to backtrack with that effect. But I wasn't sure I would fool them, and that really wasn't my reason for going on. The only person I thought would fool them is I did think Ben. I'd sat with Ben backstage and watched him rehearse this trick of just finding all the aces after I'd shuffled the deck, of my deck. And I'd seen him do it in rehearsal over the course of a couple of days, and I thought that'll fool them. It's just phenomenal what he was doing, just tracking them in real time. So, but I didn't think anybody else would fool them, and I thought I had a very slim chance, really. I mean, now it's almost a different show. Now you can, it's a bit, I think it's a bit sneaky, but now you can lead them down the garden path with various magical methods. We didn't realize that. None of us have been smart enough to think that. We're all just doing routines we had. Now people create routines for Penn and Teller. In that first show, which was a special, it wasn't part of the series. In that first show, nobody had thought like that. Everybody was just going on doing what they did.
Yeah, and it was groundbreaking, and the fact that it's still here, 7 or 8 seasons later, just shows how popular it's been, not just with magicians, but also with the general public.
Yeah, I'd love to go back on, but sort of, I think they're aiming more at a younger market than me at the moment. I sort of get the impression that they're going for a younger demographic for the feel of the show. So maybe I've intimated and hinted that I'd love to do it again, and nobody's bitten. So,
but they always love having people come back on. I mean, Sean Farquhar came back on.
Yeah, true. Maybe it's just me that don't like.
Tapped it. Well, you know what, John? Before we wrap this up, I've got one final question, which is, what's next? I asked this question to everyone I've interviewed, and I'm asking it to you. And I said at the very beginning, if you decided to retire right now and never perform again, your legacy is set. People will be talking about John Archer for a very, very long time to come. There's not many magicians that are kind of the darling of the magic community, but also have achieved so much outside of the magic community as well. You are booked to perform at magic conventions all over the world. You release magic. You performed at the highest level. You tour with Tim Vine and others. You script. I'm not going to go on because I've mentioned it.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
It's getting embarrassing. I'm becoming a fanboy. So the question is, what's next? What
well, I like many of us, I'm not really sure. I mean, going back to doing what I was doing, hopefully. I'd be interested to see whether or not anything comes of it. Obviously, I did that tour of America with the Illusionist gang.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that.
That was sort of the thing I did, almost one of the last things I did. I did a few gigs after it in the new year, but and that was with Magical Circle Christmas. That was with the same people who produce all the Illusionist shows. And I was interested to find out whether or not they liked me, and whether I'd done a good job for them, and whether they were going to book me to do some more stuff. And of course, that's all you're gone, belly up. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, whether or not they'll have forgotten about me when they restart. Oops, excuse me. Whether I'll do that line again. I don't know whether they'll have forgotten about me when they restart. I'm getting old. I fart and belch without even realizing it these days. So I don't know whether they'll have forgotten about me and moved on, or whether or not, what I did for them, which I thought I went down great and I had a great time, but whether it wasn't, their style, and they thought, he's good, but he's not what we want. So I'm interested to find out what happens with that, whether more work comes up when everything kicks back into gear, or whether even this, I don't know whether the Illusionist and all of that and the Cirque du Soleil thing, I know they got sold, and I don't know whether it's going to re-emerge for anybody. But I'm touring with Tim again, but not doing magic. Tim is doing a tour, which was going to happen last year, which is happening this year, hopefully the latter half of this year, called Plastic Elvis. So it's Tim doing a sort of parody tribute to Elvis, dressed in a black PVC jumpsuit with a full backing band of session musicians. And he basically pretends to be this character called Plastic Elvis, not really Elvis. And he sings Elvis songs reasonably well with a great band. And he says silly stuff in between the songs, but the songs are proper Elvis songs. And I'm opening for him as Big Buddy Holly. So I'm going to be opening. What I've been doing most of lockdown is learning to play this ukulele, which is an electric baritone ukulele. I don't know whether you can hear that.
Yeah.
So I'll be learning. I will be playing this and singing Buddy Holly songs, but as a slight parody of Buddy Holly. So it's a bit, I do lots of silly stuff in between, like, you know, silly little lines like, "Well, you're a beautiful lady, man. You could make a hound dog smile. You really could." And here's a little song that I like to sing 7 days a week. It's called Every Day. And then I'll sing Every Day. And when I sing, it's a bit like, well, the little things you say and do. So it's slightly taking the mick out of Buddy Holly. So that, a bit like what I've said about many of the other things I've done, is just doing something different and scaring myself. I mean, the idea of going out in front of an audience for 25 minutes, I think I'm doing, with no tricks and no jokes as such, just a ukulele and me, is scary. We did it as a one-off. We've done a couple of one-offs, and we did one at the Edinburgh Festival, the Spiegel tent, and it went well. We got laughs and everybody appreciated it, and so we got a tour now. I think we finish at the Hammersmith Apollo, actually, is our last gig. So that's quite a big venue. So, you know, me singing songs and playing ukulele at the Hammersmith Apollo is I'll definitely be doing press-ups and dancing backstage at that one.
Crazy. You seem to be doing a lot of stuff that's not even magic related. So when you did the tour in America, which, as you said, is one of the last things that you did, you weren't really doing magic there, were you? Were like the MC? No,
but I did 3 tricks. I did the Laura Buxton coincidence. I did tossed out deck, and I did my envelope routine. And then I also did a little balloon modeling bit with a kid from the audience at one point. But yeah, for a whole 2.5-hour show, you know, that's all the only magic bit I was doing. The rest of it was chatting. Ukulele, sang some ukulele songs to the audience. But yeah, I have a lot of fun. I this year I filmed an episode of Not Going Out with Lee Mack, and I just have a bit part in it. I appear about 4 times knocking at the door as a taxi driver. But I think that's in the new series which has started. So I think mine will probably get shown sometime in February. I'll bug it on Facebook when I'm on. But you know, that was great fun. I love doing non-magic related things. I think it's sort of healthy, and you know, I like to do anything that's slightly out of my comfort zone and a bit of a challenge. I'll go, yeah, I'll try that.
That's the best way to be. That is absolutely the best way to be. And maybe down the line at some point, a book, possibly, maybe.
Yeah. And unless I, you know, suddenly die of a heart attack unexpectedly, and then I will give Andy Gladwin the right to posthumously write one for me. But yeah, there he's got that on camera now. He can use that. But I prefer to write it myself and make some money from it at some point.
Don't blame you.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I think within the next 10 years, I'd like that to happen.
I'd love to see that. I would absolutely love to see that. I think that's a book that everybody would love to see. John, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You are, you know, I know I'm going to turn into a fanboy again, but you are a national treasure when it comes, in my opinion. You're a national treasure when it comes to the magic community. You are.
No, I've got it. I've got it in on video from the bad boy of magic himself.
Stop with the bad boy. I'm trying to be good. But you are absolutely amazing. You're an inspiration to me. You're an inspiration to so many other magicians, and for everything that you've done and you continue to do. Thank you so much. And you know, one more thing, John is so approachable. So if you see him at a convention, I want to tell people right now, they can come up to you. I think a lot of people...
Oh, definitely. I'll chat to anybody. Just make sure you don't come up on this side, or I'll ignore you and appear rude.
So make sure that you do when you see him at a convention, because
stay on the right side of John Archer.
I love that. I absolutely, and I didn't know that until now. So, right, that's good to know. Yeah, one more time, John. Thank you so much for being on the channel.
Really, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And guys, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be back again, 15 videos a week, I think we're doing right now. So make sure that you check us out again tomorrow. We'll be back, and yeah, see you then. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye, everybody.